One of the things that I'm curious about, we have the crash site in Antarctica, very massive mothership there.
Yes.
That we've been studying for how long?
24 years.
And we have some kind of connection between that wreckage and the underground civilization that you described in Ecuador.
Yeah.
Which you said is actually started maybe as a craft, but then it got built out or something?
The energy of the craft must have stimulated, must have had also organisms on it or bacteria, because it changed inside the cavern into a different atmosphere even. And the creatures that are down there and the plant life and stuff is completely different, you know, than the surface. And they have taken creatures out of there and brought them to the surface and they instantly died.
Can you breathe the air without an apparatus?
Yes, it's the cleanest air. I mean, it felt great down there, actually.
Now, another thing that has all kinds of light bulbs popping off in my head is that the oldest of the Antarctica wreckage that I've heard about from more than one source is apparently 33 feet tall giants.
Yes.
Have you heard anything like that?
Yes, I've heard about that.
Okay, what did you hear specifically?
That there was a lot of other sarcophagi and a lot of other extraterrestrials, bodies down there that were over 30 feet tall. One of the amazing things that we found at this other place was a 33-foot being inside a sarcophagi in a state of stasis.
Really?
So, you know, this is kind of a pre-Adamite type being, we believe. And of course, the pyramids are nearby. The empty block cube rooms are nearby. The white, 5 acres of white powdered gold is nearby. And this is where the steps descend down into the hollowed out meteorite, or whatever you want to call it, the hollowed out earth rock that is suspended around an aquifer.
Right.
They're trying to build a story now behind everything and slowly release it to the public in a very calm way, because it goes against, of course, all the stuff that we've been brought up to believe as far as where we come from in religion. So they're going to just slowly, seep these things out.
One of the insiders I spoke to said that there was a dark agenda to some degree for disclosing Antarctica. They felt that it would be able to create a religious war.
Well, everything down there is just going to destroy organized religion as we know it.
Why do you think it would? I mean,
because they have found tablets and information and intelligence down there that it's proving the history of Mars and the moon and the history of this area of the universe. I'll say this area of the universe. That being brought up would cause probably a huge conflict, and that's what they're worried about.
So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus was fake or Moses was fake or Muhammad was fake.
You're right. I mean, all these avatars have lived here and have been here and have been, these amazing gods and people. If they did bring up everything, let's just say the stories that are being told are not completely told to the full extent. There's gaps and things that are missing, and this will fill all those gaps. And it's like an unfinished book with all the religions. Wow. So this will fill in all those loose gaps, and everyone actually will come correct. But of course, I'm sure some will not.
So you're saying that this massive boulder that was found somewhere in America, the undisclosed location, has remains of giants in it?
Yes, correct.
And could you explain a little bit more? You mentioned armor, you mentioned skeletons.
Yeah, a lot of skeletons and armor, lots of gold and silver and the old medieval type treasure stuff, you would find. Lots of coins, lots of pots full of coins.
But I thought I also heard you say that you felt like the entire interior of the egg was also stuffed with white gold.
Yeah, there's about 5 acres that we determined of powdered white gold in there in a separate section. Oh,
so it's not like the whole entire egg is filled with white gold.
No, it's just one small section.
Cavities that people could use and walk around in.
Yes, yes.
Now, you were describing this very strange idea, something about this light that gold emanates that seems to penetrate matter and can be detected by certain people who maybe are psychic. Is it like remote viewing?
Well, no, it's not like remote viewing. They actually have different cones in their eyes and that can see many different wavelengths of blue and gray light. For some reason, they can look across the ocean and see a place that has a large amount of gold. Unlike, how our treasure hunters today, we don't have that capability. But these treasures that are the most amazing, unfortunately, are on land, below the land, inland. So it's a different type of treasure hunting now.
I want to go out on a limb here
Yeah.
and ask you this. I kind of get the sense what you're saying is that maybe there's a certain strain of extraterrestrial DNA that's seeded into human population, and those people, whether they're aware of it or not, might have a slightly different optical apparatus, slightly different retinal tissue, that if they became aware of what they could do, they could learn that they would see this unusual fluorescence around where a gold deposit is. Is that true?
It could be not only that, but also that somehow they were downloaded from an extraterrestrial, to increase their vision and have an upgrade. We call them upgrades. What's interesting is inside that cavern is also some other things that we have found that shows the lineage from where everyone came from. But that's the biggest secret that's down there, is the secret to all of us and where we came from, and the lineage of our DNA and what it contains, and also instructions on how to read that DNA, and instructions on how to build stargates and open up portals and things like that. So it's a plethora of not only religious artifacts and extraterrestrial artifacts, but it's also got a lot of amazing tools in there that we could use.
If you had those special rods and cones in your eye, what would you see?
They see just like we do. However, if they are looking, of course, for something, it's just off just like one small frequency of light. It just means maybe your shirt, I can see many blues in it. Now, a normal person would just see a blue shirt, but I would see maybe a couple strands of, cotton there or rayon that was a little different.
So are you saying that the number of different unique colors
Right.
that these people can see is more than average?
Yes, absolutely.
By how much?
Well, I know they can see up to 10 different wavelengths of just one color, and I've heard of 20.
Wow.
So that's a lot.
So you're saying that there would be that they can still somehow detect things that would be underground, like a gold vein underground.
Because of the flora and the plants and the rocks
Oh.
will emanate from the gold reservoir down there. It seeps up and gives it this special energy, kind of like orgonite can control, things in the sky, the energy that it gives off.
Well, that's one of the things that's so interesting, is this idea. Wilhelm Reich, when he was working with orgone energy, apparently started to develop a bluing of his skin. And he often associated orgone energy with a bluish light, where he's finding life spontaneously forming with what he calls bions. And the bions appear as these little blue corpuscles that seemingly come out of nothing and then coalesce into proteins and biological matter.
Sure.
So if that is the essence of life, then is there some connection between gold and biological life?
Well, it's not just gold. Orbitally rearranged monatomic elements is what you want to look at. You want to look at the elements,
yeah.
the elements that we're made up of when we are brought into this world,
Right.
that we need in our DNA to evolve. These things help with aligning the DNA for it to work correctly with the right voltage. If it's not the right voltage, we can't evolve beyond where we're at now.
If you allow atoms to come out of a nozzle one at a time, they will preferentially cluster into these beautiful geometric sacred geometry patterns. And the molecules will actually form into that. And somehow, once it has that structure, it's much more electrically resistant on the outside, conductive on the inside. It has all these amazing qualities, and it seems to nourish the body. So why do you think the sacred geometry connection is so important?
Because that's what we are made up of. That allows us to actually, in some point in time, transdimensionally travel.
So you would confirm then that part of the classified science is that when you get down into the real ground state of matter, that it is sacred geometry.
Absolutely, yes.
Right. Could you speak a little bit more about what you know of what's going on in Antarctica?
I've recently met with 4 of the scientists that were part of that expedition of, well, many expeditions in the past few years in Costa Rica recently. And what was interesting is there's also another craft that is part of some of the craft that's down there in a cave down near Costa Rica, I'll say.
Oh, wow.
And so this group was asking me to come with them to Antarctica to, check it out, and on another expedition.
Are you familiar with there being any plan to reveal ancient ruins under the ice in Antarctica, but not spacecraft at first or anything more modern, as part of a gradual disclosure agenda?
They already started that, so they're saying there's something down there, a big void. Just like they did in Egypt now, there's a big void. Underneath the pyramids there, I mean, we have a very, very large city that's there.
In Egypt?
In Egypt, under the pyramids, about a mile-high dome.
Really?
Yes, very large. So this is the same thing that's going on in Antarctica. So they're slowly saying, wow, through satellite imagery with special ground-penetrating radar, certain scientists which have nothing to do with trying to find bases, by the way, more like trying to find oil reservoirs and gold, have stumbled upon these giant voids.
All of a sudden, in the media, we hear this report that neutrinos were used to discover a very large new chamber in the Great Pyramid. And that's a very large, previously undisclosed space.
I've heard about that.
Now, with the technology you're reporting, it would appear that they would have known about this for a long time.
Oh, they've known about it for a very long time.
Have people been into that room
Yes.
that you know of?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. And that's what, the Alliance needs to decide is what do we release and how slow do we release it.
So is there a way into that room already? Do we know what's in that room?
I'm 80% sure they've already been in that room from the bottom up. There are tunnels that they have already dug under into this city.
What would we actually see if we ever get to see the footage of this room? What would be the most surprising thing we would discover?
Well, you're going to discover a lot of literature and tablets.
Wow.
And also artifacts that are not from unearthed, not of Earth origin.
Wow.
Technology, which most of it has been removed.
An insider that Pete Peterson has hoped to get me in touch with, it hasn't actually happened yet, but this person was involved in the excavation of a strange sort of metallic alloy sarcophagus from this same Giza Plateau area. And they removed this sarcophagus and they were trying to figure out how to get it open. They were transporting it on a US military ship of some kind. Someone telepathically interfaced with this sarcophagus and they could read the inscriptions. Even though originally it was a different language, they could read the language. And then they had to sing a certain note or phrase, I can't remember which it was.
A harmonic, yeah.
And you put your hands out like this and it opened. Mm-hmm. And then what they found inside were these various kind of handheld tools. And some of the tools apparently would give you holographic reconstructions of historical events.
Yes, I have heard of very similar stories of these sarcophagi and coffins and tubes that are made of some unknown metal, but they're seamless. Wow. And they can only be opened, as far as I knew, by lineage, actually, and harmonic.
What about this idea of an object that you might be able to hold in your hand, and then you can kind of talk to it with your mind, and it will show you like a library?
Absolutely. It's a consciousness-assisted technology that you have to hold and use your consciousness. You have to think about it. But some of these devices, these consciousness-assisted technologies, are all lineage-related or frequency-related.
Genetic marker in your DNA,
yes,
you're saying?
Yes,
wow.
Yes.
When we had Pete Peterson here last time, he gave us some extremely fascinating information about very, very long, many, many miles long, perfectly carved tunnels in South America. And he talked about what appeared to have been a vast extraterrestrial city down there. And of course, with our show on Gaia Unearthing Nazca, Pete is claiming that the bodies we had on that show were from this city.
My scientist sources also have invited me down there to analyze the tunnels, which have a lot of craft in them, the tunnels actually have beings frozen in time sticking out of the walls.
This is totally amazing, Emery. I'm just going to be honest with you. And the reason why is that I got another briefing from Pete. I haven't said a word about it to anyone. I'm going to do it for the first time right now, okay? And the briefing was that because Gaia did Unearthing Nazca, the show, that our Alliance people have gotten a lot more interested in that area again, and apparently very recently we took custody of these 5 different craft, and he said they are so advanced that we've got whole teams of people. He estimated 2,000–3,000 people are working on these craft now, but it's so advanced we have like no idea how to get into it or what the heck is going on. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But when you say we, who are you referring to took over the 5 craft?
I guess it would be
The Alliance or?
DIA, Military Industrial Complex, what we would call a MIC secret space program.
Okay,
folks.
that I can confirm 100%. They are now in control of all the tunnels and all the ships and all the bodies and all the technology, which was recently just happened.
Really?
Yes. And it's now very difficult to get in there, but I'm still deciding whether to go or not. You know, I'm right now being published in Stanford University for the Atacama being coming forward with that, with Dr. Gary Nolan. So you'll see that white paper with my name on it, which, you know, kind of gives me some credit about, you know, my background.
And you told me before that apparently the Atacama humanoid that you had in Sirius is not the only one. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I can. There is another being down in that location that has been discovered that is very similar to this being. And we are now trying to work something out so we could get this being. If we can get this being, we can get the DNA from both beings and see if they match and see if it is a new subspecies or not. But the data that we're printing right now at Stanford, is, I'm not going to spill it because I can't talk about it, is going to talk about that exact thing. So you guys are going to have to wait for that white paper to come out in a couple of weeks, and then we'll go from there. As you know, as I went over to Barcelona with Greer and Dr. Bravo to obtain, the first one and bring back that DNA to Stanford for Dr. Gary Nolan to test, one of the world's leading geneticists. So, there's a lot to do because you have to have, I think, in the future, multiple testing sites and more larger teams involved in organizations. It should be a conjoint, collective thing. It's harder to manipulate things when there's multiple people involved instead of one overseer.
One of the things that you carry with you is something that hardly anyone has ever seen. You seem to always have it with you. The only other time this was ever shown was on stage at Contact in the Desert. You handed it to me when I was doing a panel. It was a sensation for the audience.
All right. Yeah. So this, after the team and I went over there to Barcelona, this is the Ata being from the Atacama Desert. And what we did was we wanted to make sure that we, have the DNA, but let's run every possible test. Let's get CAT scans, MRIs, X-rays to look at this, because the private organization that has it, who's been very generous and needs lots of help, would like to do more testing and do more things. And I was able, by working in some other secret projects at the time, we can 3D render, organs and things. We can also 3D render pretty much any CAT scan into any material. CAT scan your brain, and I can enter it into the computer, and I can print your brain out in any material that I want. Before I operate on you, I can make sure where all your blood vessels are, and I can actually So I thought, hey, why don't I take a CAT scan of, this being and put it into the computer and make an exact replica, duplicate, cell by cell into this just polycarbonate I used. We printed it, and this is what came out, this polycarbonate exact being. And something that you could see the volume of of course, the skull was the most amazing thing. 3 times the size of our skull. Yeah. From chin to top is like, that'd be like, it's the same length as his torso, from the sternal notch to the umbilicus. Okay. And the hole in the back of the head, so was something that was done prior to myself and the team actually doing the autopsy. I did use that hole, though. That was made by another scientist before me many years ago to gather the brain material, some of the brain matter, and some of the bone marrow, of course, was what we're really after. So we took some of that from the rib cage and also from the humerus of the arm of the being.
So another thing that I find fascinating is Ripley's Believe It or Not, in, I don't know, 1940s, 1950s, somewhere thereabouts, had this thing called Attaboy. And it's just like the Atacama humanoid, same size. The only real difference is that the head is a little more bulbous in,
I saw that,
in this
yeah.
way, as opposed to the way the other one looks.
Yeah, I saw that one.
It's so similar in many other ways. Do you think that's from the same species or a
No,
similar
I don't
species?
believe so,
Okay.
no. Yeah, there's too many differences. I did look at that at one time closely, so I don't believe it's from the same lineage or phenotype at all.
But do you think it might possibly be extraterrestrial also, in its own way?
Without actually bringing the proper test, I couldn't speculate.
Right.
It wouldn't be fair.
So another thing was these edifices that the people on Easter Island wore on a necklace.
Right. Yeah.
And when you look at the necklace, when you look at the body of this thing, it looks exactly like what you autopsy. The only difference is that the face is kind of a stylized human face. It's got these large round eyes, a large kind of nose and mouth. So it's kind of an exaggerated human face with large eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That part looks wrong. But the body is absolutely dead on.
I think
So what do
there's
you
a
think is
connection. I do think there's a connection with that. Like I said, I don't know enough about their history. I just know from, learning from you about that story and seeing some of these pictures a while back, that there is correlation for the body, that is. And whether the bodies are replicas or they're the actual bodies that were mummified, how they're buried, where they're buried, the temperature, the humidity, and then all these other factors that fall into place. So I can see why you're asking these questions, because they are similar in many ways, but they're also, there's differences, and without actually having like all three of them right there for me to say, I could say, but I do agree with you that the bodies are very similar.
We were talking about this concept that you weren't that surprised by the idea of very elaborate genetic hybrids being made by our government. How much had you been briefed on genetic hybridization programs before you ever started this particular job with these so-called salmon fillets?
Yeah, I was not, actually. I was a very low classified individual at that time, so it actually didn't happen until about a year or two later, where because of what I was, dissecting or whatever, led to other briefings that led to other briefings, because a lot of these beings were connected to ships. And when I got pulled into that, then I was pulled into other things that had to do with hybridization, because I was actually told once that one of the samples was a hybrid. And that's how I knew they were doing a hybridization. They didn't hide it that time during the briefing. It was kind of like a tiger. It was a tiger-type, human-type being. It was very humanoid and only stood about 5 feet tall, and it was very, the way it looked was very dismantled. It was not correctly, it was just morphed very, very horribly. And I don't know, I cannot tell you what DNA they were used to make this creature. I could just tell you what it looked like. You understand what I'm saying? It had the aspects of a cat face, like a tiger, and it had very large green eyes. And it had whiskers, and the body was very small and very frail, and it had just regular fur.
So do you think this was like a failed prototype idea
Yes.
of some kind?
Absolutely. I think it was a total failed prototype, yeah.
What do you think this tiger being could have been used for if it had, I mean, I know it's speculation, but.
Well, speculation for me, total military type, operative type, super soldier type programs used to maybe some future war or something to release all these crazy hybrid killing machines instead of using humans, of course, first. Right. And then, send in the humans, or send in, of course, that is probably in the future. I'm sure it's going to be mostly clones and drones. The war will be fought, inside a computer room.
You said something about that the clone might have memories loaded into its mind?
Yeah, they can program the brain using very, very small sensors and, how can you say this, wiring.
Implants.
Yeah, implants.
Yeah, okay.
That stimulate certain parts of the brain, and they can also download it and make you believe, that you are Marilyn Monroe, or you are David Wilcock, or you are whoever, and this is actually what has happened to you in the past 25 years, and you just wake up in a bed one day going to work.
What is the reason for why these cloned beings seem to have a shorter lifespan?
I think anytime you take any type of cell, like we have problems with stem cells right now, when you take them and you multiply them, there's a couple of them that come out not too well. So I think it has something to do with that maybe it's not supposed to be done, and that there's a unhealthier clone every time you clone someone when you do it that way.
Were you aware of any other being like the tiger-human hybrid that was a hybrid program that you were directly briefed on or allowed to see a specimen of?
No, other than that, there was one that was kind of like a manatee-type version.
Really?
Yeah, a manatee-type, walrus-type, seal-type phenotype there that they were utilizing that had a very weird look to it. Also was disproportionate and was dead upon seeing it. And I believe that was part of a project where they were mixing mammalian with human DNA. I don't know what they were going to do with it, but it looked like an upright, like a manatee, but upright with arms and hands.
Well, just to follow on that for a second, are you familiar with there being any bases that our government or the cabal might have that would be under the ocean?
Yes.
And how would that work based on what you know? How would you build a base at the bottom of the ocean, let's say?
Well, there's bases that were already there that they took over that have been here for millions of years that were already functional. And most of the bases, so are not just like bubbles on the bottom of an ocean. They're actually under the ocean's crust.
Right.
So that's how they really bore in there. And they build it from underneath up. They don't go down from the surface of the ocean with a bunch of 2x4s and steel parts. It's a very complex, a very advanced way to make an underground sea lab.
Some skeptics might say that we barely even have the ability to get any submarine that far down. The pressure would crush any type of technology. So how have they overcome those limitations of the pressure?
Oh, no, they don't use submarines that use, our own alien reproduction vehicles. We form our own gravitational force, so we're inside our own gravity field. So we cannot get crushed. I mean, we form, that's why you can go to space, and that's why you see some of these UFOs and these other ones just go right into the water that you keep going, because they're in their own environment of their own gravity. So it'd be easy for that to, for them to transport people or equipment or whatnot.
And there's enough pressure that they can generate enough gravity that they can easily counteract the pressure of the ocean?
Oh, absolutely. Plus they can transdimensionally change the size of themselves.
Like how would that work?
Well, they kind of like dematerialize, but you're still there, but you're just out of this frequency just a hair, so you're not really you don't fall under the laws of the science of this planet. And that is for every other planet. That's why they can go anywhere. They can go right through the Earth. You can fly right in the craft. I'm going towards the tree because that's where I want to go. And as soon as I see the tree, the craft changes interdimensionally. So the structure of it will just go through it or around it. And that's exactly how they do it.
Do you think that these manatee people could possibly have been bred to be able to do work in the ocean?
No, I think that was just a scientific experiment gone bad. I think they were trying to they were probably looking at other more intelligent mammals, but they were starting with different ones. I don't know why they picked that. I couldn't even tell you. I've been saying what it looked like. I don't know if it was manatee DNA. I'm just hypothesizing because of the way it looked.
It does seem interesting to me, Emery, that in the early maritime era, there were sightings of people claiming that they saw human aquatic hybrids of some kind. And that almost universally is written off as if the sailors were just drinking. Yet you've seen line art illustrations of people who drew these things from the craft, and you see, like, for example, a being that has a human face, but it almost has like flippers coming out for arms and kind of flippers coming out for legs, almost like it's a scaly type of thing as well.
There was a race of extraterrestrials that lived in the ocean and have maybe even migrated into inner Earth oceans now. We refer to them as the Aquiferians.
Really?
And they come from another water planet, and they actually are at many different water planets. I'm not sure too much more than that.
What exactly does it look like? Could you be a little more specific?
Yeah, it looks like you said. It's a human form, and it's a very beautiful face with long hair. They're men and women of these types of beings, and they can walk. Like they're not like the mermaids you see like with these fins, but they do have fins on the outside of the body, kind of like a cuttlefish. You know what a cuttlefish is?
Yeah.
They have these fins that are on the outside of the body that allow them to propel themselves very, very fast. And they're very strong, and they're very tall.
You mentioned that to me in private conversation, that the locations of where we chose to build military bases might not be totally arbitrary. What are some of the hidden reasons for why certain bases are where they are?
Well, not all bases, but a few bases, like I told you earlier, were built on certain grid points on the planet because they were built on top of other ancient bases that were there. And some of those ancient bases already had, working energy devices and alien craft and portals.
So they would literally be able to just dig right down into that base and reoccupy it?
Well, not reoccupy it, but study it and, reverse engineer it. And of course, if they were building certain portals or certain other devices, they would make sure it was put on that same grid point or try to activate certain portals that are there.
So you're saying then that in certain cases, a military base might be built over a wrecked extraterrestrial vehicle that's underground somewhere?
Absolutely, or a base that was already been there from ancient times or from extraterrestrials that abandoned it.
So are there certain cases where the craft itself would be very large, like very unusually large?
Very large, absolutely. I mean, Kirtland Air Force Base is the 5th largest land base in the world. And you have to look at a lot of different parameters when you're trying to associate and balance all the different bases. And if you're really into this kind of thing, there's craft that are very, 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 very large that's stuck in the crust of our Earth. Some of the structures underneath the ground could be just as big, 10 times larger than the Giza pyramids.
But are pyramids in some cases?
Right, yep.
Wow.
In that kind of shape.
Wow. In the past, you've talked to me about a very interesting technology that apparently can see quite a bit more below the surface of the Earth than what our conventional scientists would think is possible. So could you talk a little bit about that first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it all started using satellites, of course, looking into the oceans. Of course, the astronauts also, while orbiting, would look into the ocean and see these, crashed old wreckages and ships that they knew, of course, had a lot of gold in them.
So this is not something that conventional people have access to? This
No.
is an insider thing?
It's an insider thing.
Right.
This type of device has been used by the military and for the DoD. I can't say who has this but it is privately owned. When we were hired, my team, to go out to look for, in an undisclosed location in the United States of America, to go remote view an area that has been known, been getting these hits of a possible gold reservoir, and they were looking for a special treasure, I'll say. And I can get into that later. They hired a couple colleagues of mine and myself to go out there and to first lay the flags on the mountain where we thought it was.
I actually got to talk to your team.
Right.
So this was not just something that I'm hearing from you now.
That's true.
And it was something we were very involved in for a while.
Yes, you were. Yes, absolutely. And so what had happened is we went out there we laid down the flags. They ran this special radar, over it, and we were 99.9% effective. So we
In what?
in finding out where the gold was at. So
But the really cool part of the story.
the really cool part of the story is a scientist called me in that developed this system, an amazing person, and my team in, and sat us down, a few of us, and said, showed us this giant void underneath the earth where, way deep below the gold. And we were like, well, what's this giant hollow space here? And what is that giant pyramid? And he said, how did you know about that? Did you go through my files? I said, no, but we saw it when we remote viewed it. And I said, well, why didn't you write that in your report? He says, because it came back unknown, elements. And I'm only out here to do one thing, and that's to find to confirm the gold.
Oh, my
and I said, this is the most amazing, groundbreaking thing on the planet. And he's like, yeah, well, with my device, I can see all the way through the earth and see everything in the earth. So just think, what I've already seen, and, what am I going to do with this information? So we found not only that, but we also found a lot of other interesting things. And the pyramids there were like 10 times the size of Giza.
Wow.
So it was a very big void, here in North America. So there are civilizations, I can confirm, that have their own atmosphere, their own luminescence, their own life, and their own water supply that are deep within the earth. And one of the elements that we discovered, that why we were called in, and some of the things they found down there, was, a huge reservoir of pure white gold. We're talking about from ancient civilization, white gold, the powder, the mana
Right.
that you hear about.
And you had said when we were talking about the smart suits that there was a white gold fuel that would create anti-gravity in the smart suit.
That
the
is
same
correct.
kind of stuff?
Yeah, and it was interesting
this was
because
very fascinating.
the government moved right in and bought pretty much all the property up until this part of this land, which was really great confirmation. But we did find something on the radar that was really cool too, and that was in the middle of the aquifer was a large rock that did not look like it was connected to the main land, and it was just there. And I'm talking a few miles, So
Like a
imagine
boulder,
water
a
going
massive
right,
boulder.
going over the boulder, and the boulder was hollow and did have a type of ruins in it.
Oh, wow.
Right. And one of the reasons that we needed the suits was actually to drill and then go through the aquifer with the suits and then drill into that. But the problem is we didn't want to flood it. We couldn't find out a way how not to flood the giant egg, because that would wash away all the white gold.
The white gold was inside the egg?
In that egg, yes.
Really?
Yes.
And it was all submerged?
Yes.
Do you think this egg was actually maybe some kind of hollowed out asteroid and they could have phase shifted it and landed it inside the Earth?
I think that at one time it was an asteroid and that somehow it was formed to the Earth, probably through molten lava or something, and over millions of, just over years, the water somehow broke it off from the Earth, and now it's just kind of in this area, surrounded by 3 feet of water. And we're talking about a very highly pressurized area.
But wait a minute, an asteroid would have come from the solar system. So are you saying you think it formed in the Earth?
Well, I think it came a long time ago. People found this as a safe haven.
Oh,
So
it was
they-
a crashed asteroid to
Right,
the Earth from
right.
ancient times,
Right.
and it's a massive boulder basically inside the Earth that they
Right.
found and could hollow out.
Right. It could have, right. They probably hollowed out or it could have been hollowed out. And then for hundreds and hundreds or thousands of years, people were just putting their treasures in there and their safe
Wow.
stuff, through a very long time. In that egg are those steps that we talked about. So
Oh.
we do have the volumetric imaging for that.
Wow.
So there's steps leading down into this, into this giant cavity. And also inside this giant asteroid or whatever it is, I'm not sure if it's an asteroid. And we didn't see a huge amount of iron, but it's just weird that this thing is a giant, hollowed out rock in the middle of the aquifer. And so inside this, we have seen many remains of humans, over 300 remains of humans.
Wow.
We have seen also armor. We have seen to the side of this giant area, which is very high as well, inside, it's split up. So it's not just like one big giant area. You have other areas, like I said, the cubes also are around the outside of that and on the inside of this thing. So there's solid parts inside this egg. Let's call it the egg. And inside that are many different types of tunnels and hollowed out areas and pyramids and sarcophagi and craft and other things. Yeah. So, we have a good feeling that this is where, possibly the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail and 1,700 tablets, stone tablets are there.
So you think it's possible that the Knight Templar people might have known about this perhaps through who knows what, ancient texts or surviving extraterrestrials they were in contact with?
Well, I can tell you how they knew about it.
How did they know?
There's a small percentage of humans who can see in a special blue light spectrum. And for some reason, this gold emanates through the earth and foliage, and they can see this hue. They have this special ability. And people like this are used to find huge gold reservoirs. They have, through satellites, found a ping in this particular area of North America. The Indians and the people over even if you're in Europe, and they could see over the horizon this blue exact hue. So they would sail all the way to this place, find the gold. So they kept going, and finally they landed in Corpus Christi, one of the ships from the Knights Templar. And we believe that they trekked in somewhere up into North America, which I can't disclose, and then buried it in this area that already had the world's largest gold reservoir.
Oh, wow.
Because they thought this would be the safest place.
Several insiders have talked about the Sahara Desert, the northern third of Africa. And it's all a big desert now, but they have all said that if you go anywhere between 40 to 400 feet down in that sand, that it is just amazing. And it's everywhere. Massive ruins of a civilization. Mm-hmm. Have you heard about this?
I have heard about this.
Okay. What do you know about it?
All I know is they did that with ground-penetrating radar from a satellite. It was very simple because it wasn't deep. And things that are not too deep, they can actually see through, a certain amount, especially sand. But it's harder with bedrock. And there are some anomalies right there that have exactly what you just said. How
prevalent do you think these voids of cubicle rooms are? Like, you only looked at one place. Do you think that most of the places we look, we might find that kind of stuff?
I think this is a significant area. And just so you know, it is hundreds and hundreds of square miles of area that we have, checked out. Okay. And there was significant enough data there to prove that there was a civilization there, and it is connected to other civilizations and other tunnels, and that the major aquifers underground are all connected, which is very scary.
All right, well, there's so many questions here, so we'll have to pick this up again next time. Thank you, Emery, and thank you for watching. I'm David Wilcock. This is Cosmic Disclosure with our special guest, Emery Smith.